Well, yesterday we were seeing the matter of power, and we saw that the power of the hierarchy does not come from the will of commanding, but power is the result of sacrifice. So we can only have power really after we have experienced sacrifice. Otherwise, it's just a mere use of the first ray without us being prepared. So will emerges in the hierarchy, and the hierarchy has power because it experiences sacrifice. And we also saw yesterday about Moria, all the story of his sacrifice and part of his history in his different incarnations. It's part of our knowledge and it's part of our awakening for us to understand that power comes through sacrifice and it does not come through self-affirmation. And we saw the incarnations in which Moria did not affirm himself. He developed things that he was not thinking about doing, and this is where all his power comes from. And this is very important because through this continuous sacrifice and through this learning experience of what we must experience and not what is our tendency to live, this is where strength for the spirit comes from. This is where the monad strengthens itself. We would have to get used to consider everything that happens here for the development of the soul and for the development of the monad, because this changes everything. So we are in a determinate situation, many times uncomfortable for our tendencies, for our rays, our temperaments. And at that moment we would have to think and remember, we would have to keep in mind that we are living for the development of the soul and not for the personality, unless we still had an not enlightened personality. But those who have a certain work in the personality can already understand and consider everything that is lived for a superior development. This changes everything. So if something presents itself, if something happens, if we react at a personality level, we lose the opportunity for nurturing. So something happens, and here on this planet could be unpleasant for certain aspects of the personality. At the time, you should remember that that could be happening because of a superior development. If you remember at that hour, you will receive some help to solve that. But if we live here because of what we know and of what we are developing here, we're very limited. So anything that may take place here, you should say, well, there is a soul in development, there is a monad in development, and that will be a contribution for that development. Anyway, we would have to move our focus and concentration from the personality to the inner levels, the superior levels, because this is where this energy, this disposition, faith comes from, for us to deal with material and in a harmonious way, in an orderly way. But if we live things get very confusing because we are in the game of forces without the capacity to solve those conflicts. So anything that may happen is about the development of the soul. If you move your attention to a different plane. And then after we talked about the groups, then we saw the critical points in the life of the groups. And we would have to choose to remain in a group, deal with each other, and the spiritual level does not come out of it for this, to step out of this relationship, to be in a soul relationship, to be in a relationship between souls, and this expands our vision of the group a lot and our capacity of being group, because in a spiritual group, if you're taking care of a spiritual, you won't get out of that level, and a group does not evolve. The group could be very positive, but it does not evolve spirituality. If the relationship is at a human level, at the level of people, this needs to go through the level of the soul, because if we consider not a member of the group, in our consciousness, our souls entering are also part of the group, and they're not incarnated. So if you remain if you bring human life into this experience, you will limit your knowledge about the group, because you will know the group through the incarnated ones, through the incarnated souls, through people. And this is the minimum of the group. If you do not seek this relationship between souls, with these human matters, if you do not enter, you won't get to know the group, because most of the group is not incarnated. If you're in a spiritual group behaving, you will lose the vision of the group, the perspective of the group, because you diminish the group to these. We saw that at a certain point, the members of a group need to take this action, and if they do not see this need clearly, they will live common life in a spiritual group, believing that they're doing great spiritual work. They're not doing any group while they are in another one. Evolving is something different. It's for you to be aware, in contact, in working with other levels. This is what it is to evolve. So you must be working like a channel for other levels. And for this, you need to contact innerly souls that are part of the group, which is a greater number of patients. So, a human relationship to a superior relationship is one of the biggest spiritual couples today, because they this. They won't do this very naturally. They do it through conflicts, through exhaustion, conflicts. And then I notice the soul is in another level. In that crisis, they have not lived that crisis, they are still to live that crisis. So everything is calm and stop. That crisis has not taken place yet because people are still in conflict with each other. So we need mature crisis. And we also saw that if we do not, our biggest attachment is our own person, our tendencies, our personality. These are our great attachments. While we do not overcome them, and we cannot attain any superior level of vibration, and we cannot help the group to elevate its vibration. If personally we maintain attachments, if we personally maintain priorities in certain things, we maintain seeds. So this must be very so that we can go through these transitions and crises in the more balanced and the most balanced way possible. And this crisis of going through human relationship to the other one, it's a crisis then they saw that that crisis has not yet come. They're working on human relationship. So what we were saying, trying to transcend that, to start being a more balanced thing. While we do not free ourselves from these things, while we're not above the level of the ego, we're like having a spiritualized common life. While the ego is not transcended, while we do not identify with the soul, identifying with the soul is not a question of concept. Identifying with the soul is really to ask before any question if your soul would do that. It's well as to say that you're seeking your soul if you're acting like always. How would I grab that cup if I was connected with my soul? I would grab it in a different way. If I remember this first, it's a theory if you say that you're connecting with the soul and identifying with the soul really. You only do it if before doing something you ask yourself, would my soul do that? Would my soul do it this way? You may not have an immediate answer, but at least you get a feeling. If you're already working on your intuition, an impression will come to you. and you will have
Existe hoje movimento de energias no planeta que facilita muito o desenvolvimento desta consciência grupal, o desenvolvimento desse trabalho
the development of this working group.
Foi resgatado do plano físico, do plano
From the physical, emotional, and mental plane,
substância que era
many substances were rescued, which could be reused. The hierarchy elevated those substances, made several nuclei around the earth with that substance, and that substance
substância emocional mental, esses núcleos estão disponíveis e a hierarquia dedica esses núcleos aos grupos. Então não é que os grupos
it's not that spiritual groups may have to transform themselves in superior things overnight. Between spiritual groups and hierarchy, there are many energy centers as if they were satellites, small bases around the earth, which are very adequate for the nature of each group.
teve de resgatável nesses níveis, a operação resgate recolheu e aquilo que não foi liberado do planeta construiu
That which was not
e isto foi
liberated from the planet
isso está em volta da Terra, como se
found nuclei like satellites, small bases of energy
energia que está disponível
that are available for groups.
disponível para ajudar no desenvolvimento da consciência grupal. E todos esses núcleos de energia resgatados, tudo isto nos ajuda a desenvolver novos padrões, porque tudo isto foi
And this all helps us to get new
Então, grupo
patterns.
conta com esse
So a spiritual group counts on these groups. A spiritual group counts on these small bases of energy
de energia resgatada,
realized, rescued,
muito especial
very special energy for the development.
grupal. E isto tem possibilitado dos grupos receberem muita energia.
And this allows groups to receive a lot of energy because at each appeal that is done, energy comes from those small
Chega
nuclei and that
agora nos grupos
reaches the groups
ajuda muito.
and helps a lot.
Podem perceber
And you can notice this very clearly when you have an evolutionary meeting and harmonious, orderly, when you have some contact with a member of the group, correct contact, a harmonious contact, you can feel that something descends there.
além da ajuda que possa vir das almas que estão ali envolvidas, vem esta energia que está em volta da Terra, especialmente para desenvolver a consciência grupal. O trabalho da hierarquia foi muito no sentido de
The work of the hierarchy was about building this species of belt of nuclei. Each group in its energy and ray can recognize this energy, can receive that energy and benefit from it.
além disso, está disponível
But in addition to this that is available in the whole world, there are regions of the planet
energética
with a
apropriada
energetic
para a formação.
composition for the formation of those groups.
Existe, além desta ajuda que se disse, existem as regiões
There are
que são
regions
preparadas com certo teor magnético para ajudar no desenvolvimento
to help in the development of that consciousness. So if we consider ourselves in a region like that, this is just one of them. So if we consider ourselves in a region like that, we have a certain responsibility of using the energy
de estarmos usando
in a group way,
para aperfeiçoamento
to use it to improve group union and group task.
dedicam-se a isso,
Some dedicate to this thoroughly.
cujas almas
Some beings
situação de poder estar
have
tratando disto 24 horas por dia, não tem outra coisa que tratar. Então esses eventualmente têm mais responsabilidade.
and others need to treat about this because they have many other things. So spiritual groups, which are formed by all, by those who give of themselves completely, for those who give half of themselves, for those who give of themselves partially, and the way of this mix in the degree of surrender, the group offering lines of network by developing the network. The network of service includes all the degrees of surrender. So a network of service is an esoteric tool that spiritual groups have in order to post. Did you notice that? Having a network of service, a group service, this degree of surrender is in perfect harmony with another degree of surrender, you see. So this, it's not small groups. In the action of the network of service, through the network of service, that all comes together. So that's why in the nuclei we ask that the network of service to be very developed, not to have a network of service just to show off, but for the network of service to be the soul of the center, because the network of service unites all the degrees of surrender. So within the group there's a strong potential because all the degrees of surrender are included, even those who live in the nucleus from day to night until those who come once a week. This all has the same value through the network of service, and this does not happen through studies. This does not happen through mental activity. Of course, that mental activity is taking place, but the network of light brings all this together in the physical plane. If we saw this from an exact point of view, we would say that even the individual they should be developing this consciousness and practicing this network of service, because this is the way of being all together in different degrees and being in the same level of union. The network of service brings this. And here we made the experience of beings which were very like the opposite to others. They solved everything participating in the network of service. The other part is left for the next incarnation. So this is the network of service. So the network of service is not something that we would need to do. This is the soul of this union. In the inner sense, this is the soul. So we would have to recognize that the personal limitations of all of us, we all have limitations. Personal limits should not be more considered than at a certain point you can recognize the limitations of an individual, not to overcharge them, overburden them, because they have limits. So you will not overburden them. But those limitations should not
as qualidades do indivíduo. Porque as qualidades do indivíduo é isto que o trouxe para o grupo espiritual. O que trouxe o indivíduo para o grupo espiritual, o que impulsionou, o que colocou o indivíduo dentro dos grupos espiritual, não foram as
what placed the individual in that group were not their defects, but their qualities. So if they are in a spiritual group and they're part of it, they have qualities that place them there. And we need to be attentive to these qualities. We need to be looking at these qualities, recognizing these qualities all the time, because by recognizing those qualities, allowing these qualities
desenvolver essas qualidades, é assim que as limitações vão passando para um outro nível. Não só vão se resolvendo, mas se não podem se resolver,
but if they cannot solve themselves, they will go to a different level. And if this work exists in the group, you will see that the individual will be caught by a task not because of their qualities, but because of their defects, which are necessary in their task. So a person with many qualities should not be determining for a certain task, but someone with certain defects is more suitable for that task than the other who didn't have those defects, because the task demands these defects. For the individual to be limited in some ways, if they're not limited, if they have no defects, they won't be a good fit for that task. Pay attention at these topics, because you will see this all the time.
Quando está tratando com uma outra, ela está tratando também com os defeitos da outra, mas ela está incluindo
they are including defects of others, absorbing that others have defects, they're like that. This is interaction between souls, you see. So we need to start this training from here, from this level in which we are conscious.
Então, se você olha e vê logo o defeito dele, preste mais atenção. Se ele foi colocado dentro do grupo em uma determinada tarefa, aquele defeito é necessário ali.
That defect is necessary, and it will bring a series of movements that later on you will understand what that represented, but just after you are in there as a soul and not as a personality with an unbalanced emotional body, but you're there overcoming your practices, your ways of being. You were overcoming all that to understand that between souls everything is included, and we need to use everything that the individual represents, of quality and limitations also, because that is necessary if you observe well. And self-criticism,
é muito necessário. Quanto mais você vê estas coisas, mais você percebe e mais você está incluindo o indivíduo. E você
you're including the individual more, because perceiving not only their qualities but also their difficulties. If you're acting as a soul, that is one more reason for you to include and admit them. And this is really a great energy for the members of a spiritual group, because the members of a spiritual group are shaped in all these things, because no one is perfect.
Tem outra imperfeição, diferente da minha. Então aí isto precisa eventualmente até se fundir.
Eventually, you
Se
even have
harmonizar,
to
harmonizar
fuse.
defeito com o outro. Isto não existe só no nível das qualidades. Isso existe no nível dos defeitos também.
That exists in the levels of defects also. Many times we ask ourselves, the relationship between two people, one is given the best to the other.
Quer dizer, ali está havendo tanta compreensão que as qualidades e os defeitos estão se somando, estão se resolvendo. E aí um fica menos defeituoso.
And then one will be less
Pode responder, não, eles estão dando
defectful.
pior.
Oh, but they are giving each other the worst. This is what we should balance in a group relationship. We won't say human because it's a little beyond human, common human relationship, but this is almost a human level relationship. This needs to be assumed. We need to go through all these crises, recognize what it is to see as a soul, and then we'll start experiencing different crises that the group provides us.